This episode of Between Two Psychs is proudly sponsored by Sanctuary Personnel. As a specialist recruitment partner across psychology services, education, social care, and healthcare, Sanctuary is dedicated to connecting talented professionals with organizations that truly value expertise. They take a consultative approach, meaning they understand the sectors they serve across the UK. If you're looking to strengthen your team or elevate your own career, visit sanctuarypersonnel.com. You can also reach out directly to Kamru Zaman at k.zaman@sanctuarypersonnel.com and Susie Cousins, s.cousins at sanctuarypersonnel.com. Contacts in the description. Thank you and enjoy the episode. Welcome to another episode of Between Two Psychs. Social media ban, it's coming into effect, and what do we think of it? Is it going to be good for children, or is it going to be another policy that goes nowhere? What do you think, Mike? Where do we start with this one?
Do you think social media is constructive to friendships and relationships?
I think it has its place. I think it's a minority place, just so we're clear, in my own opinion. I had a colleague, I'll give him a shout out, Harry Morse. He did some studies about 10 years ago on the impact of online gaming on relationships, particularly amongst young boys. And he found that it was constructive in maintaining relationships. However, I do think it has a toxic element to it as well. I think that always being on and always being available to your peers is not advantageous in the long run.
Yeah, there is that 24/7 vulnerability, for want of a better word, isn't there? Where you need to be constantly knowing what's being pinged around the group that you belong to.
Yeah, they even made a word out of it, FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I remember my daughter being on one of them, and you acquire credits, and if you're not on it, you lose your credits or something like that. And therefore, she was on it all the time to make sure that she didn't lose her things.
Yeah, it was at the Snapchat one. The more you post, the more you send, you get like a little fire icon, and then the more you stay on it, it changes colors or shapes or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So, the question about does it contribute to friendships, and it will do because you're communicating. But there's the vulnerability, which is you are constantly available, constantly exposed. You're needing to, refrain from doing other things because you are having to spend your time on the social media.
Yeah, and Mike, as you know, I get asked to write a lot for magazines and stuff because I'm like semi-famous now, apparently. And one of the things they asked me to comment on was the impact of WhatsApp. WhatsApp's not on the social media ban. And it got me thinking around social identity. If you think about it, try to put yourself into the shoes of a teenager, which for you is going back 2 or 3 centuries. And you have to have interactions with your peers. And then you need a moment to be on your own. You need a moment to reflect on your interactions to figure out what you're about. If that's always on, that's surely got to have an impact on how you develop your own identity in the young adulthood.
Yeah, it will do. And we don't know at this point whether that will be for the good or the bad, do we?
No, I know that there's mixed feelings about the ban in Australia, about, young people are tech savvy. They always find a way around these things, some to greater degrees than others. I think the sentiment in itself is good that we are trying to regulate it, which means that the majority of young people will comply to some degree. But fundamentally, the question for me is it a good thing or a bad thing? And at the moment, I'm leaning towards it's a good thing. I think it's going to help people interact in more connected ways rather than superficial connection, I think is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, maybe the word ban wasn't the best word to use.
Regulation, maybe. Suspension. That's a good school word, isn't it?
As soon as you get into the word ban, you are creating a knee-jerk response, aren't you? Which is, you can't tell me what to do, or people finding another way around. But the actual reasoning behind the social media ban, I agree with you. I would be more leaning towards the positives. And what leads me into that position is a lot of the psychological casework that is either undertaken by myself or people bring through supervision. There's two main themes that run through there. One is social communication difficulties, and one is emotional regulation difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And just to keep it really sort of simple for my purposes, the social skills issue is because people are not having the ability to, like you say, switch off, but also not having the ability to learn how to read social tone, how to use tone, to read body language, how to convey body language. So those things are deteriorating with social media. And the other thing that is emotional regulation, because on text and short bursts of communication, you're allowed to be something in the virtual world that you're not necessarily allowed to be in the real world.
Go on. You can't stop there. That's like the introduction to a really good book.
Well, I often think about people who, for example, develop what would ordinarily be a long-standing relationship where, you've built up rapport and you get to know people over time. You get to know their nuances. And I see a lot of young people who develop those best friend type relationships within hours because of the intensity of communication that goes on through social media. And you can start becoming something you're not. So when I say about the virtual reality, you have this identity of virtual reality, and then when you turn up and actually meet people face to face, you've got to deal with the reality. And it can be quite difficult allowing your virtual self to become manifest through the real self.
So almost like two different identities at play.
Yeah.
Your reality and your virtual reality.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like a modern version of Jekyll and Hyde, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
You spoke on something there around social communication, which got me thinking. And I was listening to a podcast with Steven Pinker, the famous language scientist. And he's written many books on RSA and written communication. And he was saying something that was adjacent to what we're talking about. And he said that it's much easier to convey yourself, the meaning that you're trying to get across orally, because we have evolved over, thousands of years to do that. But written language is you've got to anticipate what the other person is thinking, how they feel, how do you communicate the imagery, how to communicate the tacit communication, the body language that you describe. And when you're a teenager, that's obviously much harder to do, but we're doing it all the time through text messages, and it means that there's many more chances for miscommunication.
Yeah.
And with those greater chances, there's more chances for falling out, isn't there? So is there something to say that by removing the social media element, or hindering it, so to speak, dampening it, whatever word you want to use, that children will have a better chance to form meaningful relationships, but also to engage in restorative relationships and how to overcome those conflicts and challenges? Or am I just being aspirational and delusional here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. They're the sort of things that we would hope would emerge from what we call face-to-face interaction, wouldn't they?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said around. We talk a lot in this podcast about identity development, the importance of sound relationships and understanding how you fit into relationships. And I think you get much more quality feedback from interactive or interpersonal interactions rather than virtual ones. And I think we might even see you said about emotional regulation, we might see a byproduct of this is that within schools, we might see the teachers are finding behavior regulation more sustainable. I'm thinking of our secondary school teachers primarily in this regard. Do you think there's any credence around that, or do you think there's still a lot more work to be done first before we're going to start seeing that behavior improvement we're always hoping for?
Yeah, I think there'd be quite a substantial period of adjustment and be a long time before we start to see, evidence from research and whether the imposition of restrictions of social media actually causes social benefits.
Yeah. And one of the other things about social media is that when we use it too often, it might not necessarily be the use of social media, whether it's doom scrolling or sending messages for hours into the evening. It's actually the loss of opportunity. And I remember attending a conference whereby the key finding of the keynote speaker was that social media itself didn't attribute to poor attention skills or aggression in young people or poor social communication skills. It was the fact that they weren't engaging enough in extracurricular activities, your football, your gymnastics, your music lessons, your creative writing lessons, whatever it is. Those things that allow people to explore their identities through activities outside of the school's curriculum. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on, do you think we're going to see young people going more towards extracurricular activities now if this ban comes into place? Or do you think we're going to see this revolt against the social media ban? Don't dare take away my TikTok and Instagram.
I'd like to say yes, we're going to see, improvement in social activities, but I think the reality is we're going to have just a void. They're taking something away, and what's it being replaced with? Sorry about the dog barking, by the way.
Sounds like he's telling you off for taking away his TikTok.
Yeah. But when you take something away, you need to replace it with something.
Mm-hmm.
So, the classic when people give up cigarette smoking, for example, the people that are successful will say, I replaced it with something.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people took a long time to give up, and they would also always say things, not always, sorry, but they would often say things like, I stopped smoking, but I didn't replace it with anything. So it's the same with the social media. What are we going to give people instead?
The educationalists will be like, "Oh, give them more literacy and numeracy," whereas I'd be saying, "Give them more football and rugby." What would you give them more of?
The same. I mean, I'm thinking, when I was growing up and there wasn't social media, there were clubs. There were swimming clubs and athletics clubs and all the stuff that people do, really.
But you see, all the funding's taken away from that. There's nothing they do anymore for young people, they say.
Well, this is kind of where I'm going. What is there out there? Is the infrastructure in place to replace the social media ban? And I'm sure it is, because all those activities haven't stopped. But who's sort of guiding young people about, well, what do we do instead? How do we communicate? What's the methods that we can use?
Certainly, even since my day, there's a lot fewer youth workers out there and youth projects to sort of encourage people to engage in these extracurricular activities, and then they find their passion and they run with it. And I suppose the thing has always been, oh well, it falls back onto schools to show them. And schools have clubs and all that stuff, and they're great. But surely this can't be another thing that schools have to pick up. There has to be something else that will fill this void.
Yeah, there does have to be. I wonder if we go back for a second or two on to the split sort of identity, the virtual versus the real, because that is something that is brought about by social media. Like I said earlier, people are able to say and do things online that they wouldn't necessarily say and do in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And what this does for people, we start with those people that need the social media in order to have a sense of identity. If we take that away, what is it going to do to them, and what should we be considering?
Sounds like you're hinting at there might be a mental health backlash. So, what are they getting out from a sense of self perception? So, there's quite a lot of young people who will have, a lot of following. Yeah, there's young people who are, and they're quite, in depth followings. There's one person I can think of, Unjaded Jade, and she's got like nearly 1 million people, and all she talks about is different education systems across the world. Now, I think she's in her early 20s, but there'll be people who are under 18. Is social media banned for under 16s? I can't remember. I think it is.
Yeah.
But there'll be people out there where they're getting their sense of purpose from having these followers, and they explore their topics through that. Is that who you're getting at? Their virtual reality identity? Or are you thinking more lower key than that?
I am thinking of that, and I'm also thinking about children that we work with who, we have this podcast about, as children with special education needs and disabilities, who don't have the ability to be the confident persona when they're face to face with people. So social media gives them that avenue to be something that they want to be. One of the classics that I've come across is children with autism.
Mm.
So they can be something and they grow in that virtual identity. So if we take that away from them, what's potentially going to happen?
That's an interesting one to consider because they get something from putting that persona out there. So if we put ourselves in the mind of a young person with autism who feels the need to engage in Facebook or Instagram, that I do X, Y, and Z. I'm very creative. I can put videos up. I can put creative text up. What do I get back from that? I get likes and thumbs ups and comments. That makes me feel good about myself.
Mm-hmm.
But when I go out into school, I can't engage in this tacit social communication stuff that we mentioned at the top of the episode. And that makes me feel bad about myself. So I go back into my social media world in order to get my top up, my well-being top up. Is that what you're kind of getting at? So that's going to be lost.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we've probably all seen it as well. There's people sitting next to your family or your loved one, and there's two mobile phones on the go. And you then learn that someone next to you has just posted onto social media, having a great time waiting to go on holiday. And you think, where's the great time? Because we're not actually talking,
Well, check in with such and such. It's like, I didn't know we were talking to each other. Like, you're in a different world. So that's the other side of the coin. You're absent-minded even when you're together, which is not great for connection, is it?
It's not. So, when we come back to people with special educational needs who are on social media, they're able to create some sense of positivity, some sense of belonging, some sense of courage that they can't necessarily portray or develop in reality. So we do have to think, what are we going to do for these young people?
There's such a trade-off there, isn't there? Because when we think of, you and I come from a world of inclusion where we're always thinking about how to support the minority population to thrive where the majority needs are met. And this is one of the few times where it's probably the other way around, where social media is interrupting the way the majority connects with each other. But the minority, the example we give, is possibly thriving.
Yeah.
And how do we support them back into that? And we have strategies in place. We've spoken about the impact of Lego therapy, social stories, but I feel like there needs to be something more grounded, more everyday that you're getting at in order to get that well-being uptick. And I don't know the answer to that, is the honest truth.
No, there isn't one as we sit here now, but with the SEND reforms, we'd be going into locality and cluster working. I would hope that the cluster groups and that's schools and professionals working together around the experts at hand model, would start to identify the need for training or the need for provisions to be developed to support these young people who will potentially be retreating a long way into themselves because they haven't got the courage to be who they were in a virtual world.
Just going down that train of thought, who they are in the virtual world, is there an argument for the more they get back from that virtual world, the more willingly they opt out of the real world?
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, just because they're getting their well-being top up, there's a risk of isolation. And regardless of whether you're autistic, neurotypical, whatever, isolation is nearly always bad for long-term well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So then we've gone full circle, haven't we? Where the band would actually support their long-term well-being at the expense of their short-term well-being.
Yeah.
We're unraveling a lot here, just with one case example, because we're seeing that by taking social media away, we're impacting negatively on potentially impacting negatively on a young person's identity. But we might be supporting their long-term identity formation.
Yeah, it's like that film Avatar, isn't it?
Go on.
Well, you exist on your own in a pod, so the real you is hidden away in a pod. And the avatar is the thing that can do all these wonderful things that you couldn't do physically.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're essentially saying we've got to go back to the pod, open it, and take that human out of the pod and start to say, right, let's look at reality here.
Yeah, that's true. It is. Let's look at reality here. And we focused on the inclusion question here, but let's shift it a bit onto those who are what we would classify as neurotypical. They've also been impacted on, and this social media pervasive inclusion in the everyday of our lives has impacted on how they relate to one another. Apparently there's a joke going around, if you ever want to give a Generation Z the heebie-jeebies, is you pretend they answer the phone and just hand it straight over to them and say it's for you, because they don't talk on the phone, they text, and that's how. I've never tried it, but I would love to, just to see if it works. The point I'm getting at is there an element of social interaction that's been lost generally, and what can we do to support not only those who are on the autistic spectrum and on the fringes of social communication, but how do we get everyone to be more comfortable in a world without social media? And we said about social clubs and schools, and you mentioned the cluster support, but I think it also comes down to the family unit as well. It's like encouraging people to do the simple stuff well, eat dinner together, play. I always advocate for board games, play board games together, get out to the park, just really low tech interactions as a way of living. I don't know, maybe I'm talking rubbish at this point.
So it's not just this point, Adam.
Well, it's a hard thing to figure out because it's been part of our life for 2 decades now, really. Facebook was set up 2 decades ago, and it's been pervasive at least since 2012. And so how do we move on without this technology? I think it's not easy just for our young people, but even for us, one of the other big populations affected is those in retirement. Apparently, they're pervasive social media users. Maybe there needs to be a ban for those who are entering retirement. You need to get out to your knitting clubs more, Mike.
I do, yeah. Well, you did say that you needed some underwear, so I better get my knitting needles.
Like a nice new vest, please.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But what I was going to say, with the social media for the young people, we were talking about interactions and so on, and you handing the phone to them, etc. I remember, I can't remember if it was like a neighbour or a friend's child, but they were having real difficulties at school. They were only sort of year 8, year 9, something like that. But they're having real difficulties in the school because they've got caught up in an online argument. And because it was online, of course, everybody was able to chip in. And then it became a real thing about, whose side is who on. And it very quickly turned a bit septic, and this person was on their own versus quite a sizable group of people. And it was all because the argument or the disagreement occurred online, whereas when I was growing up, something like that would have occurred face to face. It couldn't occur any other way.
No.
Maybe a letter that you used to post in the letterbox, but it just couldn't develop, and it couldn't grow at speed the way it has.
No. And if you're writing a letter, that's a proactive action, whereas send a message is reactive, isn't it?
Well, for you, yeah, because you never send anything to me. I always initiate the conversation, and you respond.
Yeah, that's
getting the
true.
hint. I'm getting the hint.
No, you're not. You're really not. We're still here. And but your point is true, because you're leading into cyberbullying, aren't you? And I just realized what I said to you, which is a form of cyber. You're holding your arms. What do I make of that? And but this is my point in that article I was telling you about, is the impact of WhatsApp is everybody's a part of these groups. They all have funny names, and there'll be like 20 people in it, and they'll send memes to each other, slagging each other off. You got one person depicted doing X, and they got their pants down or something. It's not actually them, but they've used AI to make it look like them or whatever it is. And then what you described was they've had an altercation in school, and then they've carried it into the conversation online with no teacher mediation, no adult mediation, no parental oversight. Well, I think there's apps that help with parental oversight, but I'm not sure. And those young people, then it just mothballs. It escalates and escalates and escalates, and becomes a fight of domination rather than restoration. And this is what's been lost without this adult mediation or learning how to do positive social interactions, which they would have had to do in the school, because you have to all get along at some point. You don't have to like each other, but you have to get along. But on the virtual world, you can just keep escalating. You don't have to bring it back down.
Yeah. And of course, you get a lot of suicides and a lot of self-harming because of the mental health impact from online communication.
And we know the pressures that young people are under for high grades, and the lack of training the teachers get on how to support that side, the mental well-being side of young people. It just adds fuel to the fire on that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have to come to a conclusion, Mike. Is this social media ban a good thing?
I think on balance it is. Yeah, even though we've covered the flip side today. I think on balance I would be in agreement with a proposal to limit or reduce.
Yeah, I think so too. I think anything that gets more face-to-face social interactions leads to better social identity, better restoration of conflict, all that sort of stuff that we all should be going through, and the real skills that you take into adulthood and into employment. So I think it's a good thing.
Okay, Adam. If you think it's a good thing, I agree with you.
Okay, talk to the listeners for a bit, someone sensible. If anyone's got any comments that they'd like to make, or anyone who would like to ask a question on social media ban, or if you'd like Mike and I to go into a bit deeper onto another aspect of it, please let us know in the comments. We also would like you to subscribe, whatever platform you listen to you on. It really does help. It tells the algorithm they listen to us a bit more. And Mike and I love when people listen to us, so that'd be great.
Yeah, and apologies for the background on my office. It was being newly decorated. Now it's cluttered and got everything in it while the rest of the house gets decorated, including the vacuum, I can now see.
Didn't even notice that. Excellent, Mike. Chat soon.
See you, Adam. Bye.
Bye.